Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is a podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I got the opportunity to speak to inspirational speaker, leadership, and relationship coach. Darrell Williams joined me on the show. Darrell is also a military veteran. He's also a servant leader, and he's also an associate pastor. He wears a lot of hats. Listen in as Darrell walks us through his story of how he went from Compton to the White House. He'll talk about how he weaves faith into his career every day and gives you that same advice. He'll talk a little bit about what his greatest leadership challenge was and is today, and what is the greatest leadership challenge facing leaders today. And he's going to give you some hints and tips on how to overcome those. So much more we talked about. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have with me tonight just an inspirational leader. I'm just going to introduce him because I can't wait to hear his story and for you to hear some advice from someone that has done it, that's continuing to do it, and that will just advise you on leadership, period, and life. So without further ado, leadership and relationship coach Darrell Williams has joined me tonight. Darrell, it is so great to have you on. How you doing, sir?
Kenny, I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be here. I've been looking forward to us getting together for a long time.
Yes, me too. Me too. Thank you so much. I've got to get your backstory because I know there's a lot in your backstory that has brought you to this moment now where you're so dedicated to helping others and building other leaders up and helping with relationships. Tell us about your backstory.
Sure, Kenny. So for me, it actually started back before I joined the military. I grew up in Compton, California, right? So people that know the movie Boys in the Hood,
Yes.
that was the actual environment that I actually
Yeah.
grew up in. And my brothers and sister grew up during the time of Straight Out of Compton. So on the East Coast, a lot of people that saw those movies, they would come to me because they knew my background. Like, oh yeah, you from Compton? Hey, what was that movie true? Was it true? Did they add anything? And I'm like, everything they said was pretty much how it was. I mean, there was
Wow.
nothing to add to that. And they were,
Wow.
and then Kenny, the next question I always get is, so how did you get out?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what they got to share is I actually learned a lot. Matter of fact, I was on a podcast, excuse me, a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling the gentleman, a lot of my leadership came from growing up in Compton because, again, I always tell people, leadership comes in different fashions. And unfortunately, there are some negative parts of leadership,
Mhm.
but it does not take away from the fact that, again, if you have people following gangbangers,
Mhm.
unfortunately, that guy is a leader. Now,
Yes.
he's not using his leadership traits at that time for something positive, and we hope that eventually, somebody will get to him and he'll flip that and start using that
Mhm.
to lift people up. But that is a leader. So I grew up around a lot of people that had leadership in them. And although they were there, I made a conscious decision, like I just didn't want to go that route.
Mm.
And a lot of people was like, well, how did you, do that when there's so much gang violence and drugs and, people trying to get you to go the wrong way. And what I would tell them is, and even the young people that I speak with, is like when you stand for something and you really like that's who you are, I
Mhm.
said, people will respect you more than you can imagine. The people that don't get respect are the people that flip flopping. They got one foot trying to be a gangster, one foot trying to be hardcore, and
Yes.
then one foot trying to be smart and all. And it's like those are the people. At least when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of respect for them. Matter of fact, I was telling somebody, the gangsters when I grew up had so much respect. Like when they were shooting dice, like certain people they would not let hold the money because it would lead to a fight and arguments.
Wow.
So when I would walk down the hall and one of the gangsters would recognize, like, hold up, him right there, he can hold the money. So I would hold the money, in between classes while they were shooting dice, and people say, "Well, what's the significance of that?" I'm like, the significance of that is, even though these individuals had a certain type of lifestyle, they still recognize, like, although this guy's not like us, I trust him.
Yeah.
Although this guy has a different path, I respect that.
Yes.
This guy never judges us. He never says anything negative. He just says, "Hey, I just believe y'all got something better in store, and I can't wait to see it." Right? Because I've always been that positive person. Like, the glass is always half full, and it's a mindset. So growing
Wow.
up in Compton, that allowed me again to kind of avoid a lot of those things. And by the time I got to my 11th grade year, I'll never forget, Kenny, my dad said, "Hey, if you get ready to go to your 12th grade year, I just want to let you know, two men can't stay in the same house." Just like that. So I'm like, oh, so I guess I need to start working on my future now instead of the day after graduation.
I love that. Wow.
You
Wow.
sort of just put it like that. And
Yeah.
so I ended up running to a recruiter. I didn't want to talk to the recruiter, but I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to join the army. He said, well, what do you want to do? And I started making up stuff. And man, this guy was so great, Kenny. He kept asking me really life-changing type questions that I did not have answers to
Hmm.
going into my senior year. And the more he talked to me, the more I was like, man, he's making sense. I need to figure this thing out.
Hmm.
And I started listening to him. And the more he talked, I was like, you know what? I think the military was for me. So I ended up joining the Army
Hmm.
straight out of Compton. And I went in as now it's more of a human resources specialist, but at that time it was called administrative specialist.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where my journey began. And right away, I had some really good mentors, and that's one thing I always tell any leaders. You always got to have good mentors on the road to where you're going.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't care what industry, I don't care if you're a leader in the community, you always need to have somebody above you that's either walked that path or a similar path. Not that they're going to help you with every single thing, but they're going to at least allow you to miss some pitfalls that you do not have to fall into. So I had some great mentors when I got ready to join the military. My two cousins were my first one, and they just told me, you know, don't go in the military just to get a stereo and then leave in 2 years. But
Mm.
that's what they did. They were like, make the most of it, take advantage of it. And I took that and ran with it. So my
Hmm.
first assignment, I went to Germany because I was telling the guys I want to go as far as possible and see the world.
Hmm.
And when I got to Germany, saw this really sharp. It's like a staff sergeant, which is kind of like a middle manager.
Hmm.
Looked very sharp, spit shine boots, creased uniform, and I'm like, hey man, how do I become you? Like, I know you're doing something right.
Yes.
And he told me, Kenny, he's like, are you sure? Are you serious? He said, yeah. I said, yeah. And he told me, do this, do that. And they had this thing in the military called competition boards,
Hmm.
where you had these study guides, and it could be anything from the nomenclature of an M16 to drilling ceremony. There's all these different topics. And the military was really big on obviously physical training, discipline, and knowledge. So I would go to these competition boards and I was winning. And I got all the way I was in a different unit, it's like a personnel unit in Europe. And I got all the way for that, my particular unit, went for Soldier of the Year, and I lost, but I won because one of the sergeant majors, which is a senior leader, recognized me in all these different boards and said, hey, I'm going to be in your area in Germany. Let's sit together and talk. And at that time, Kenny, I had orders to go to Fort Hood, Texas, which normal Army unit, no big deal,
Hmm.
ready to go and do my soldiering. But this guy saw something in me and said, hey, I think you can do good in what they call special assignments.
Hmm.
So these are assignments that require security clearance.
Oh, wow.
Um, you don't wear your BDUs at that time, BDUs all the time. You kind of wear your class Bs and things like that.
Hmm.
And dumb me, Kenny, I'm trying to talk myself out of it. Like, I don't want to go to the Pentagon. I want to go to Fort Hood so I can, be with my peers. And he gave me
Wow.
a great lesson. He said, not everybody can do a special assignment. It takes a certain maturity level.
Mm.
And he said, I see that in you. I see
Wow.
the discipline. I believe that if you do this right, you will still be a successful soldier. You'll just take a different path than most.
Hmm.
So, man, once he broke it down like that, I was like, okay. So I ended up going to the Pentagon when I left Germany. I did not like it. But the reason I didn't like it, Kenny, because I did not take advantage of what it had to offer. I was so focused on what I thought I should be
Hmm.
that I did not concentrate on what I was growing to be.
Wow. Yes.
And a lot of middle managers, I would tell them, pay attention to where you're at now. Still canvas the landscape and see what's going on, but don't be in such a quick rush to do it your way.
Yes.
Because when we pause and listen to our mentors, the journey is still tough, but it's so much more rewarding.
Hmm.
Because even though I was at the Pentagon and I did try to leave early, and I had another mentor that he would not sign my paperwork to leave early, and I'm like, come on, man, why are you holding me back? We always think of these negative reasons when we don't get promoted or don't get what we
Yes.
want. But he really was looking out for me, and he was
Yes.
like, and this is a good lesson for middle manager. Sometimes the place that we want to go is actually lower than where we are.
Wow. That is a great
And
lesson. Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and he taught me that, and he was like, "You're going to a unit, although it's a traditional Army unit, but it's lower than where you are now."
Hmm.
He's like, "You got to start thinking future and not present only."
Hmm.
So he started making me think about, okay, I got to go forward and not backwards. So I stayed at the Pentagon, kind of took a different mindset, and then eventually I saw an advertisement for the White House Communications Agency, and they had a recruiting team. Never heard of them before, and I just thought, man, that would be neat to kind of work at the White House, right? Going all the way from Compton to the White House,
Amazing. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And had no idea I would go or get selected, and I actually got selected for that. So my first taste after the Pentagon was I actually went to the White House, and I was traveling what they call it the operations coordinator, kind of led teams. The officer was in charge of the whole team, but then I was kind of like that right hand person
Hmm.
to get the team from point A to point B. So when I first got there, I was supporting President Bush Sr.,
Hmm.
and then President Clinton came in office, and I was doing all this traveling all over the world, still being a leader. And at that
Hmm.
time, it was really a middle manager, even though I was leading people, but it was really a middle manager type role.
Hmm.
And just took it to heart. Wasn't trying to be something more than what I was um, supposed to be. I just took it and worried about taking care of the people.
Mm.
Because all my mentors are saying, you take care of the people will take care of the mission,
What a lesson. Yeah.
and then everything else will fall into place. So I did that, loved it, had a lot of fun doing it. Then I just got to a point, and we all get to that point where we get a little stagnant and like, the job's not that exciting anymore.
Hmm.
And I called my branch manager and said, hey, I want to volunteer for a short tour, which is normally a place like Korea or Italy or some other hard places. And the guy was like, let me get this right. You want to leave the White House Communications Agency, support the president, and go to a short tour? He's like, what's the catch? Are you about to get in trouble? Are you trying to run from something? And I said, no, no. I said, my record's good. I'm clean. I said, I'm leaving on top. I said, so I want to
Yeah.
leave while, I'm still doing, productive things. So he actually said he'll do me a favor. So he sent me to Korea, but I went to a military intelligence unit, which was really great. And he said, I'm going to bring you back to the White House because it's hard to find people with those security clearances.
Hmm.
So again, going to Korea for 1 year, not knowing what to expect. And I ran into this situation, Kenny, where I noticed, well, a lot of people didn't go to these MI units. In the military, you have your regular job, but then you always are a leader.
Hmm.
There's always other roles that you take on, whether it's platoon sergeant, squad leader, any of those type of things. And in this particular MI unit, the senior people, the middle managers, only wanted to do the cool MI stuff. They didn't want to do the soldiering thing. They were like, nah, that's too hard, taking too much time. So in this MI unit, you should have had an MI platoon sergeant, an MI first sergeant, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first sergeant was a military police person that was there. And he was only should have been in a support role, but since somebody wanted the role, he was the first sergeant. And then when I got there and he saw what my background was and how I love to take care of people, he asked me, could you be the platoon sergeant? I'm like, sure, but shouldn't that be an MI person? We're in the MI unit. And they were like, those guys don't want to do that. All they want to do is just play on the cool stuff. And I'm like, no problem. And Kenny, I had so much fun, man, because now you got these soldiers and Korean soldiers that are in the military for the very first time, and they're trying to figure this thing out by themselves. But they should have had a mentor like
Yes.
myself, walking them through different steps, asking them what do they want to get out of the military, how's their family, right? Do you know what it takes to get promoted? And it was such a fulfilling 1 year that it was just fantastic. And then I left there and I went back to the White House Communications Agency. But at that time, I got promoted to kind of a senior manager on the enlisted side. And then in that role, I was traveling supporting the vice president. So I was supporting Vice President Gore,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually Vice President Cheney. And I'll talk a little bit later, but after 9/11, instead of supporting the vice president kind of on a they would go out a week ahead of time and we would kind of set up all the communications and then they would show up. After 9/11, they took me and four other individuals from that cast of 30 that would rotate supporting on the road. And they spun us up in this emergency action training. And then one of the five of us was with Vice President Cheney every day in town, traveling on Air Force Two, and just again providing that emergency action backup just in case a 9/11 situation happened and the vice president needed to do some things
Mm-hmm.
on the fly. And again, 5 years traveling on Air Force Two, and I loved it because most people that are in those roles, it can go to your head. You're getting off this plane and
Yeah.
you got team members waiting and they're trying to grab your suitcase and your
Yeah.
bag. And
Yeah.
I was like, guys, y'all know me, right? I came from where you were, so I carry my own bag. Tell me what I can do for you while I'm here.
Wow.
Right. And they would say, like, oh, we got a Secret Service agent that's kind of spun up about his communications. And I got this White House staff person that's asking for more than what they should get. So I would work those issues for them whenever I landed, because I figured my role was not to have the big head and have people cater to me. My job was to get off that plane and make things better for that team for however long I was on the ground, whether it was 1 hour, overnight. And it was just a great role that I,
Mm.
you know, look back on. People that I've traveled with, when I still see them, I'm part of the Alumni Association, they will come and say things like, you were one of the best trainers. You always looked out for the team. You never took credit for anything that was good, but you always fell on the sword when it was something bad. And they said, we never forgot that about you. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my role.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing story and what a journey you've been on. And it's clear to me, anyone that's going to listen back to this, as I'm listening to you, I don't know how many times you said this, you kept talking about taking care of your people and how you lived every moment for that. And I want to ask you in a second about servant leader,
Mm-hmm.
which you definitely are. But I got to, you're so humble. I've got to bring this up because I'm going to get chills talking about this because I definitely want to know, and I think the audience will educate them a little bit because there might
Sure.
be a good part of the audience that doesn't know who Roy Wilkins was, and you won the Roy Wilkins Renowned Service Award, and my mom kept Ebony and Jet magazine on our coffee table forever.
Yes,
And
remember
so
that.
that's how I knew Roy Wilkins because he would be on the cover relatively often, as head of the NAACP. I mean, so many things that he did. The march from Selma to Montgomery. He organized, the March on Washington, and you got that award. And so I'm really want to know. I think I know why you got it, because you are a servant leader. But how did that feel, getting the Roy Wilkins Renowned Service Award?
And that was definitely one of the highlights of my professional career. I was working for actually the agency that I work for now, and the nomination came up for that because the way they do it in the Department of Defense, they try to nominate one person from each service, right? So you have an Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine rep, and then they recognize one Department of Defense civilian. So when I saw it and somebody was talking about it, I was like, oh, that's great. Not really thinking about it. And then somebody was like, hey, there's some questions on here. Can you answer these questions? Not really putting two and two together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no problem. I'll fill it out. And when they submitted it, forgot all about it, didn't even think anything about it. And then I get this phone call and I'm like, okay, who's this? And they're like, you don't know me, but I'm so and so for the NAACP. We just want to let you know that you're our Department of Defense nominee for the Roy Wilkins Award. And I'm like, get out. Are you serious? I mean, it was totally out of the blue.
Yeah.
Forgot all
Wow.
about it. And then they were like, okay, now we got to fly you to San Antonio because the NAACP conference that year is going to be in San Antonio. We need you to fly out here. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to fly to San Antonio on the government's dime to receive a personal award?
Yeah.
But again, Kenny, it goes back to being the best person you can be.
Yes.
When I talked to my supervisor about it and said, hey, if I can't go, I totally understand, you know, and how about we have some problems going on in San Antonio? And she had a meeting with a senior leader and said, we need to send somebody out to San Antonio
Ah.
to do what do they call it? Basically, it's an assistance visit
Uh.
where you get the temperature of what's going on,
Yes.
and said if we can do some training while we're down there, maybe train up the leaders. And so the timing just couldn't have been more perfect. So she asked me would I mind going down there doing leave a little bit early, do this workshop and some training and some leadership sensing sessions, and then roll into the Roy Wilkins piece. And I'm like, absolutely, that's the least I could do. So I remember that
Awesome.
week, not just getting the award, but also just going there and again providing leadership to a group of people that was kind of going through some tough times.
Yes. Yes. Wow.
And so again, just to be able to like, it really kind of spun like this is why you're here. You know what I mean? It didn't
Yes.
like, okay, this is the
Yes.
crown of I got Roy Wilkins, I'm good. And it was like, no, this is a reminder to keep going, keep
Yes.
helping, keep looking out for others. So then by the
Yes.
time I finally got to the ceremony, and I'm looking at all these people, and I'm like, how did I get up here? It was unimaginable.
Wow. Man, oh man. Ah, I want to challenge our audience. If you've never heard of Roy Wilkins, is that if that's the first time that you've heard his name, please go look him up.
Yes,
And the dignity and the leadership that he had, you definitely have that. And there is no question in my mind why you got that award. I'm so proud to be able to talk to you about this, but congratulate you. I know it's a while ago, but unbelievable, man. And that is, and people will, if they look it up, there's gonna be a good part of our audience that know who we're talking about. But
good.
folks that don't, go look him up, man. It is definitely our history, our nation's history.
Yes.
um I am so proud of that. I want to ask you this.
Mhm.
um Servant leader, we're going to have folks that are going to listen and say, man, I want to do that. So, what's a couple of things today for that leader that has maybe just taken over a restaurant or a retail store and want to be a servant leader, but maybe struggle with that? What are a couple of tips, Darrell, that you could give them that they could get to that place, which I think is where leaders should be?
Absolutely. So one thing I tell people is, first of all, based on the circle you're around and the mindset that you're in, do not allow society to spin the fact that a servant leader is soft.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many times it's a negative connotation when you hear about servant leader, especially in the military, because the military is big on, I don't know about the servant piece, but they get it twisted. Now they're getting it, but when I was in, they got it twisted and they thought it was a soft connotation. But only thing a servant leader really is again, I'm putting others before self. That's all a
Absolutely.
servant leader is. So if
Absolutely.
you're starting a business, if you're in a leadership role, again, you should not be the first person that's putting in for leave. You should not be the first person that's taking perks, right? You should not be servant leader is I have to put everybody else before me.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
when you grasp that concept and not just, I'm, I'm doing it just because it's the right thing to do. Now, you can start off that way,
Mm-hmm.
but true servant leaders make that such a habit that it becomes who they are.
Mm,
And,
absolutely.
and so that's the key I tell people is, get rid of the mindset that being a servant leader is soft. Continue to create those leadership habits where now I'm not just putting people in before me because it's the right thing to do. I'm putting them before me because that's a part of my leadership DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Like when
Mm-hmm.
people see Kenny, they know like, oh man, that's the guy that put in this other person for an award, or
Mm-hmm.
that's the guy that helped two other people start a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't have to do that. Like that's what servant leaders do. We are always looking at the situation that we're in, and then we ask the questions: how can we make it better? Who can we help that's in the middle of this situation? And how can I equip them so that when I'm out of this picture, they will still continue to grow and be a better leader than I am?
Wow. Wow. What a great definition, and the way you laid it out, it just makes so much sense to go that way. And for leaders even that are struggling, saying, "Hey, well, how do I get results?" This is how you get results, man. It really is. Um, how do you? Because I know you're also an associate pastor. How do you weave your faith into your leadership? Where does that play in at? And what advice would you give folks out there now that might be struggling a little bit with? They have a strong faith, but yet, how do I bring that into the workplace?
And Kenny, that's a great question. I tell people all the time is, one of the passages in the Bible I love, I think it was about Paul when he said that he had become all things for all men that he may win some.
Hmm.
I take that passage as if I'm in a situation where people are doing this, then I'm going to do what they do. I'm not going to walk into a place and wear, I always like wearing lapel pins, right? I'm not going to wear a cross as a lapel pin because if I'm a leader, I have to make myself approachable where there's somebody that may not be of faith and maybe somebody of faith. I don't want to put anything there that's I don't want to go talk to that Kenny person. He's wearing a cross lapel pin. He
Mm-hmm.
might try to convert me today. I don't need God right now. I need somebody to listen to my story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be a good leader, you have to put yourself in a situation where people want to come speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing when I do is I use the principles of the Bible from the leadership, but I don't use scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't give stories about what I did in church. I use stories about outside of church.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry myself in such a way, and this always happens, where later on down the road, somebody that I helped or mentored or coached, they'll talk to somebody else and say, man, I had a great conversation with Kenny, man. He really helped me out with a lot of good things. And that person goes, well, Kenny's a person of faith, right? And then they'll come back to me and say, hey, why didn't you tell me that you were associate pastor? I'm like, because I'm at work. This is not a church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to work. I'm here to lead. And I did not want church to be a barrier to me helping you becoming the best person that you could be.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kenny, they'll say something like, but yeah, I would have been cursing that much if I would have known that you were associate pastor. And I tell them, I say, hey, this is
Yeah.
not your house. This is not my house.
Yeah.
If that's how you're comfortable expressing yourself, who am I to put my values on you? That is not what leaders do.
Right.
Leaders create an atmosphere where people feel like they can be heard and they can receive some good guidance.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I said, I have a Bible at work, but it's inside of my drawer. I don't put it on the top of my desk.
Hmm.
I don't send people, scriptures, and we do the weekly chats. Because some people, we start a little chat in the morning. Hey, good morning, everybody. Have a good day. And, I'll put just regular things because my thing is I would rather live it than try to teach it.
Yeah. I love it. And I'm sure there was nobody that was shocked, right? They saw your fruit, so there was nobody who said, yeah, I was shocked that you sold your oh, man, I knew it. I'm sure that's what they said. I knew there was something about that guy because they saw your fruit. I love that. Um, Darrell, what's been your greatest leadership challenge? And second part of that question, what do you see as the greatest leadership challenge for leaders out there today?
So for me, my greatest leadership challenge is always trying to put myself in a situation where I can understand the young leaders coming behind me.
Mhm.
So many times, Kenny, we're so quick to, they got to bump their head the way I bump my head.
Mhm.
They need to do it the way I did it. And it's like, I don't want to be that, oh, there's the old guy again talking about how they used to do it, 10, 15 years ago.
Yes.
Like my greatest challenge is always, I want to make myself relevant.
Yes.
That's the key. And
Yeah.
so, and that causes me to get out of my comfort zone. I have to like put myself out there and go to these young future leaders and say, hey, what are you good at? Well, I'm good at computers. You know what? I'm not that good at computers. So I'm going to reach out to you one day so you can come help me get better. Well, aren't you the brand chief? I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't mean I'm good in everything.
Right.
I say there are some things that I know for a fact I'm not good at, and I need people like you on my team to help us get to that next level. So again, my biggest challenge is always finding ways, and I'm really good at. I'll find something that somebody's good at, so I can put them in a position where they're going to either do something for me, my team, or maybe somebody reached out to me and said, hey, can you come do X? And like, you know what? I got a better person for you. There's this young guy named Kenny. He's up and coming. I'm telling you, he's the right person. Give him a chance to do it, right?
Mhm.
Because I think that's important for us as the older leaders. We have to get out of this mindset where the young people don't want to hear us.
Right.
They
Yeah.
want to hear us, but
Yes.
they don't want to hear our approach.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I think that's my biggest challenge.
Yes.
Definitely in today's society, even when I was in the Army, um, trying to get a better understanding of the new type of soldiers that were coming in and understanding why. Like I remember I saw the turn because when I was coming in, you didn't ask, you just did what they said. But when I got to
Yes.
Korea, those soldiers were asking, well, why do I have to do that? And,
Yes. Yes.
and a lot of senior leaders took that as disrespect, but it wasn't disrespect, Kenny. We
Yeah.
were bringing in a smarter generation of leaders.
Absolutely.
So we needed to adapt our style to them versus making them adapt to us.
Yes. 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 And those are the leaders that still get stuck today that, feel like, hey, nope, you guys got to adapt to me. This has been amazing. What great advice that you've had. I'll ask you this last question, and I definitely want to leave some time and space for you to let people know how they can connect with you. What would you say are the top two or three skills that leaders absolutely must have today?
Yeah, that is a great question. The top skills that a leader needs to have today. There's definitely a lot of them. For me, I go back to the Army values, which I still have my little card, even though it's folded up and things like that. I just recently found a coin that had it on there because I always want something to remind me.
Yes.
But those values are loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage.
Wow.
And when you take those initials together, without the vowels, it's leadership. That's the best way to remember it.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow.
And I always tell anybody,
Mm.
if you can, make any of those values truly who you really are, like be loyal. Even if I don't like the supervisor, I don't like the mission or ADC's going in, I'm still going to show loyalty to those that are above me,
Mhm.
right? The D for the discipline, right? I can't come in halfway, right? No matter how tired I was, I know I'm going to be on Kenny's podcast. So guess what? I got to suit up, right? I got to look my best because that's the discipline that I have, whether this
Yeah.
is on audio or video. I got to bring Kenny my best
Yeah.
because he's presenting his audience the best advice at that time. So you got to have the discipline where even when nobody's looking, you're still doing the right things, right?
Yeah.
The R, the respect. You have to respect people around you, even though somebody might not look like me, they don't wear their hair like me, but I have to respect them. The leaders that get the greatest resolve and results are the ones that they respect their team so much that their team can't wait to give that respect back versus that mentality of, well, I respect you when you respect me, or you got to earn no, start off in the beginning, giving them the respect and see how that will happen. And then the selfless service. And no matter what I do, it can't be about me, Kenny. It just
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
cannot be about me. It
Yeah.
has to be about the goal, the team, the mission, whatever those things are. And then the honor piece, right? You have to honor everybody around you. You have to honor yourself,
Mhm.
right? Which kind of goes to that I, which is that integrity. Like, don't cheat yourself. Don't do something or make a decision that's going to, cast a cloud over everything that you've built up,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And we all hear that different industries, like, "Oh, I can't believe that person did this or
Yeah.
cheated that way."
Yeah.
That all that goes down into the integrity.
Yes.
Like, live your life as a leader where it's so much intact that even if there is a false accusation against you, you don't even have to open up your mouth because everybody around you say, Darrell may have did something like that, but not Kenny. I've
Yeah.
seen Kenny in action. I've seen Kenny behind the scenes. That is not Kenny's nature. So that's where that integrity comes from.
Yeah.
And then that last piece is the personal courage. A lot of times as leaders, we get too comfortable.
Mhm.
This is how I got here. I want to stay on top and I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to learn anything new. And as a leader, we have to have that personal courage, right? We
Yes.
can't expect
Yeah.
people to do something if we don't do it first. So I'm still one of those people, like if we have something new, I'll volunteer. And they're like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because when I mess up, because I know I will, it will allow those in my group to say, well, wow, he kind of showed us what not to do. So we're already 50% better than what he did.
Yes.
And that just takes that personal courage to know that it's
Yes.
okay to make a mistake.
Absolutely.
Failure is not something that's going to lead you from success. I always tell people failure is a part of the road to success.
Yes. No doubt. No doubt. Phenomenal advice. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you for the next 3, 4, 5 hours straight, man, but I want to be respectful of your time. This has been amazing. How can people connect with you?
Sure. So people can connect with me on Facebook through Alliance Seminars Coaching.
Mhm.
They can also reach me on my website, allianceseminars.org, and I can send that information for the show notes.
Yes.
And again, I just love helping people, Kenny, and everybody that meets me, knows this. When you go from the hood to the house, there's something along the way, and people along the way, and things that you learn that it's like you can't just sit on your laurels, right?
Yeah.
So I'm of the nature where I have to give back, whether it's through a podcast, volunteering at my kids' school,
Yeah.
doing things in the community. It, like, to me, like when people say, "Oh man, our neighborhood is so bad," or this and that, instead of being that person, it's like, well, what can I do in my neighborhood? What's that one thing? No, I can't clean up. right? All the violence in Baltimore or Annapolis, those are the two major cities, and I'm in between.
Yes.
But what's that one thing that I can do? And they just focus on that part
That's it.
and
Yeah.
then do another part and then another part and just see where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just say this last thing because you
Sure.
said, I love how you said from the hood to the house. I don't want the audience to miss this, and I'm sure they won't.
Mm-hmm.
When you said when you were getting ready to be a senior in high school, and you said that you told some of those guys that were living a tough life, that were really tough, you told them, I think there's something better for you. I'll be glad to hold the money, but there's something better for you. At that young age, you were encouraging people, and that is just so ingrained in you. And so thank you for sharing all that. That was such an important point. I tell you, I didn't want to interrupt you because
No,
your
no, you're
story
fine.
was so great. So I didn't want to interrupt you then, but I'm so glad you brought it back up because that to me, among the million things I'm going to take away from our talk, I love that. And leaders can, it doesn't matter how old, young you are, you can give that advice even at a young age, because even the gangbanger wanted to hear that encouragement, and so thank you for that, man. That was such an awesome part of your story, but all of it was great. God bless everything you're doing, and continue to do it, please. We need you. We need leaders like you that are going to lift up others, no matter what age they are. So Darrell, thank you so much for your time, being so generous with it tonight, for me. And I can't wait to connect with you again.
Absolutely, Kenny. I enjoyed it. Many times as you'll have me, man, you got my information.
I
Never
do.
hesitate to reach out to me.
Okay, absolutely. It's on tape, so I'm going to hold you to that.
Absolutely.
So, we'll leave it there, folks. This has been Kenny and Darrell. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.